Around the idea of another event like this to talk about UX and his take on it, where it's headed, but also where it's come from. So, without further ado, I'll introduce Chad Vavra.
Thank you. All right, so I tried to make this fun. So please laugh and be loud. God, I hope you laugh a little bit. All right, so user experience is the center of the universe. You believe that, right? So you think about it like this, at least in the technology, which is my area of focus, user experience is the design of not how we use technology, but how we feel about using technology. And so good UX, to me, is really about building trust. And trust is elemental. It's yes or no, you trust it or you don't, it's 1 or 0. So trust, UX, the universe. UX is about universe. My name is Chad Vavra. I'm the director of Rosetta, UX director at Rosetta. And not this Rosetta. This Rosetta. So our mission at Rosetta, if you look on the website, is to translate unique customer insights and behaviors into integrated marketing programs, platforms, and products. But really what we do is we build trust. So I'm also an advisor to a company called Majestic Apps. And Rosetta and Majestic could not be more different. Rosetta is established, and it's big, it's global. Majestic is just a startup. And the thing about being at both of these places is that I learn a ton from both of them. It's really interesting to me. And hopefully what that means is that I then go back and I teach both of those companies the things I learn. So I kind of live a dual world, and my life is actually really good because of it. So I highly encourage it, is that if people can get their feet into both of those worlds, the startup world and the established world, it's really cool. You can do some really amazing things. I'm on Twitter, at Chad Vavra. I love people who follow me. Like, please follow me. And this is my cat.
Do we need to record?
Is it recording?
I don't know.
I turned it on.
Okay, good.
Should be recording.
I didn't, so.
Okay, awesome. And that's my cat. And I put my cat in here because that's how my cat looks at me. When I'm asking her questions like, is Google Glass going to make us smarter? Is it going to augment our memory? Or are we going to rely on it so much that we just become the fat people in WALL-E with these like little translucent floating screens in front of our face? And FitBit, I've been a really avid FitBit user for like over 3 years, and I love FitBit. It's super cool, but I want it to do more. I want it to tell me when I'm going to eat the bad meal that is going to make me gain weight. Not tell me like, hey, you should go on a diet, or hey, here's how to be healthier. I want it to say, don't eat that meal. Like, stop, don't eat the meal. Or hey, go up those stairs. I want it to be that smart. And jawboneup. So I just started using jawboneup, which is kind of weird because I use Fitbit too, and I have Nike Fuel. But anyway, the thing is, jawboneup is really interesting, but I want jawboneup. So I use it primarily to track my sleep patterns, my sleep habits. I want it to tell me when I'm too tired to be funny. Like when I'm too tired to be sarcastic. And I know this is hard to read, so let me kind of read this to you. My friend Kim posted on Twitter, very inspirationally, when you burn a bridge, 10 more open up. And my response was, which is why I blow them the F up. Yeah. And then I asked questions like, is Google now the future of web navigation with no navigation? Like Google Now just is. There is no navigation on Google Now. So the thing about these questions that I ask is that it's about our lives. It's about the value that technology can bring to how we live. And it's not really about the software. It's not really about the interface. It's really about what we do and how we live with it. And so the execution of user experience for me lives at the intersection of people's lives and technology. And that's something that it's not new. No one's going to no one hopefully is going to dispute that too much. But here's the thing. UX is known, in the next slide I have to preface this and say that this is my experience. Like, Great Expectations, I don't know if it's the book or the movie, I can't remember anymore. There's this line in it that says, I'm not going to tell you the way it happened. I'm going to tell you the way I remember it happening. And that's really important here because there are people who will dispute the next slide in this profusely on Twitter and everywhere else. So this is my version. UX is known for information architecture, content strategy, interaction design, sitemaps, and wireframes. And content strategy is even debatable sometimes, depending on the organization you're in. And here's the thing. It means that when people in agencies and the clients that I've worked with in the past have thought of UX, they immediately think of documentation. And I get that, because documentation is the checkbox on the project, on the project plan that they check off and they go, hey, we got paid for doing this. We promised to do this and now we're gonna get paid for doing this. And, that's, I guess, okay, but documenting isn't the hard part of UX. The fact is, I could teach anybody to use OmniGraffle or Visio or Axure or any of them to drag and drop and create a sitemap or a wireframe. Like, I have a 3-year-old kid that figured out drag and drop like 3 weeks ago, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, it's really ABC mouse, good guy. So the other thing, I could teach, basically this whole room in an hour, I could teach you all how to code an HTML page, link them together, and you'd have a prototype. That's really not the hard part of user experience. So it's the execution. That's just not that difficult. What is hard is people. And understanding the expectations, the emotions, the environments, and the thresholds within all of those that make people change their behaviors, that's, to me, what's interesting about UX. That's what's cool. People change kind of slowly. And expectations and emotions, those things take generations to change. And so what's funny or cute or trusted, it's all established. But changing it is hard. And I'll let you decide what's funny and what's cute on that one.
Is that your kid?
That is my kid.
Oh.
Being adorable, isn't it? Yeah. Licking the door. So technology specific to the web, which is what we kind of all sit and work in, has changed a ton in 20 years. And so let's talk about the past a little bit. In 1994, January 1994, there were 300 websites on the internet. With today's speed, you could have looked at the entire internet in a day. At the end of 1994, there were over 13,000 websites on the internet. 1994, in my opinion, is the tipping point that changed the world. And it's convenient because it's 20 years ago, so light a candle. And I was right there with it. So in 1994, I was a college freshman at Iowa State University, head full of hair, enviable, I hope. I had high-speed internet access and way too much time on my hands. So the thing is, here's the first banner ad that was ever published on the web. Now, it's hard to read, but it says, have you ever clicked your mouse right here? You will. I emphasized here. I don't actually know why. I had a time machine and I could go back and make that not happen. I totally would. And here's the thing. Computers in 1994, in the early mid-90s, they looked primarily like this. And I'm not showing you this to be nostalgic or to try to validate the evolution of my forehead to the evolution of a computer. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show that experience changed a lot. So if you imagine how a person experienced technology when technology looked like this, they were chained to their desk. They turned it on, they experienced it, they turned it off, and they walked away. And there were no distractions while they were doing it. Then things changed a little bit more. Web 2.0 came along, and we started to talk about user-generated content. I think that was the term that everybody called it. And really what it was commenting or blogging, being able to have a two-way conversation. And so products and customers could now communicate back and forth, and the customers expected to see a response, and the products had to pay attention. And we went out and we would tell clients, let's put commenting on the site and build trust. If we go back to it, it's all about UX, right? It's all about trust. We're trying to build trust. But what we were doing was we were also adding a lot of complexity to the things and how people experienced it. And so that's the other trick, is that in the late 90s and early 2000s, things like laptops became much more popular. There were handhelds, and Wi-Fi started to proliferate. So that added a lot of complexity because you were no longer chained to your desk. You were taking these technologies into social situations that they hadn't been in before, and it created distractions that pulled you away from the technology. So as an experience designer, we had to understand that people weren't going to come and start at point A and go through point B and end at point C. They were going to come and then they were going to get distracted, and then they were going to move into a different room, and then they, so it became a disjointed thing, and user experience changed at this point. And now, good Lord, we have tablets, and we have phones, and we have phablets, and we have mobile data that is disguised as vegetation. So this is a cell tower that's being disguised as a cactus out in the middle of nowhere. And this is probably on some pristine remote beach where there's nobody for miles. It's a palm tree with a cell tower. Like some creepy data tiara or something. But here's the thing, is that now distractions don't take us away from technology. Technology is the distraction. So what we do is distracting. So is Google now the future of web navigation? So if user experience is the intersection of people and technology has become a distraction, I think Google now is a really nice first step in removing the distraction, because they're removing the navigation. And they're bringing in an intelligence. You could say an artificial intelligence. And the beauty of it is in simplicity. It's ubiquitous across multiple devices. It follows you where you go. It's there when you need it. And it looks simple. But the thing is, it's not really simple in terms of UX. It's really complicated because of this. If you hear a buzz in the room, it's just those words, right? But Google now is built on big data. And big data is cool because it predicts human behavior. So if you think about it, data is our behavior. It's a recording of our behavior. So now our expectation, because of that, has completely changed as consumers and users. So now that we think you know more about us, we expect more of you. And that's changed UX a lot. So that's kind of where we're getting to in the present. So who here has an iPhone 5S or an iPad Air? Has the M7 chip in it? Have you guys all heard about this thing? It's called the motion chip. So what it does is it captures how you move, it captures when you move, combined with the GPS in your device, it knows where you move. Now if you take that data and you combine it with the data that Apple collects, it knows who you're moving with. They probably know whether you're laying down or not. They might even know how long you're moving. It gets really creepy. And you can't turn it off. And with the tiny little bit that chip does, they can tell a ton about you because your behavior is you. So think about how valuable that is. In the future, that's more valuable than the photo of what you ate for breakfast. It's more valuable than all the likes combined on Facebook. So, if you think about data as a shadow, and you cast it behind you, it's like website analytics. It can tell you where you went, it can tell if you came back, it can tell how long you stayed there. But if you turn data around and you put it in front of you, and you compare it to all the other data that's out there, it becomes predictive. And then we can say where you're going to go, and what you're likely to do. And we can hope to understand your expectation. So I'm going to remove a little bit of the creep factor from this in a minute, don't get too concerned. So I have this example. It's a little, bear with me. It's cool, but it takes a little bit of a Inception kind of mind trip to figure out. So imagine that these two guys, me on the bottom, my friend Rick Webb on the top. No, I did not ask for permission to do this to Rick, so maybe next time I'll come back and talk about data and privacy.
Yeah.
So imagine that the two of us at this age, let's say 10 years ago, just for fun, whatever. Imagine we're living a very similar life. And that's kind of interesting. And Rick grew up to be this guy, really successful, this guy, VC in New York City. So, We had really similar lives here. Well, what if Rick was 10 years older than me? And I looked at the shadow of Rick's data 10 years ago. That's 20 years ago. And I said, well, at the beginning of the shadow, we have very similar lives, except it's 10 years apart. And so I use that data, and I look at the prediction of what's going to happen to me based on Rick. Then I change my behavior, and I change what I do. Am I still going to become this guy? That's super exciting to me. That's what I think is so cool about user experience right now, is that we have the opportunity to ask those questions. We have the opportunity to design for those questions, and it creates an introspection. So it takes data and it makes it reflective. And that to me changes lives, it changes behaviors, and I think that's amazing. So I have this other example. This one's fun. So 2 years ago, this man walked into a Target. He was furious. He demanded to see the manager. He was really furious. So the manager came over and he threw a pile of advertisements out in front of him and he said, "Why are you sending my young daughter stuff about pregnancy, stuff about babies? It's so hard to raise a little girl and you are sending her stuff that glamorizes getting pregnant. I was like, what is wrong with you?" And the manager was horrified that they had made a mistake and accidentally put this girl into a database that said she's pregnant. And they started sending her all this stuff. So the guy was mad and the manager apologized and oh my God. So he leaves. 2 weeks later, he comes stomping back through the front door. The manager sees him and is thinking, oh geez, again? The guy walks over and he says, "It's my turn to apologize. My daughter was pregnant, and you knew before I did."
Oh my God.
So here's what happened.
Wow.
Target realized that there's a few moments in life that change when consumers change their purchasing behaviors. So they get like, people like will shop at Target all the time, and they'll shop at Walmart all the time until something in their life changes. One of those things that affects consumer purchasing behavior is pregnancy. It affects it in the biggest way. So Target decided if we can identify who's pregnant as early as possible, we can retain them as customers. We won't lose them to places like Walmart and whoever else, the big box stores. So they had their data analysts start looking at all of their existing customers who were pregnant and back out like a year or 2 years and try to decide, well, what changed when they got pregnant in their shopping behaviors? What did they start looking at on our website but not actually buying that could indicate that they're pregnant? And when they thought they had a pretty good algorithm, they deployed it. And this girl went into a Target, she bought some organic lotion, she started doing things a little bit differently, stopped buying Tylenol or whatever that she normally did buy, and they dumped her into the database and started sending her advertising for pregnancy. Now, the problem with this is that it exceeded an expectation and a comfort zone. And so you would think that in this experience, Target would have been like, whoops, and stop doing this. The thing is, they didn't. What they did was they stopped sending pregnancy and baby exclusive advertising. So now they still do this. They still identify who their customers are that become pregnant long before they hit their third trimester, long before they've told anyone. They start sending them advertising, but the advertising is mixed into everything else. So what they did is they took a creepy, overextended expectation and they dialed it back. And so they still are giving a benefit to that person's life. They're still doing something that hopefully that person is being exposed to these products that they want to be exposed to as a pregnant person, but it's not identifying them as pregnant until they're ready to be identified as pregnant. So it's one of the things that UX people have to consider. It's one of the things that we have to solve for, and I think it's interesting. So that's the past and a bit of the present. So now let's take a minute and kind of look at where I think we're going. Remember the banner ad? Have you ever clicked your mouse right here? You will. October of 1994, Wired Magazine. Here's one that ran about 4 days ago. It Wired magazine. It's a Verizon ad. It's like, he's a little animated and the color's better and the images are crisper, but nothing has changed in 20 years. And it pisses me off as a UX person that nothing about this has changed in 20 years. I imagine my dad in the 80s, a child that grew up in the 60s being told that he was going to have a flying car, being kind of equally annoyed, right? Like, we can do better than this. This is stupid. If I could go back to 1994 and make this not happen, in a heartbeat. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about FitBit. Now remember I said I want it to tell me not to eat a bad meal, but not just every bad meal and not just go on a diet or be healthy. I want it to know when I'm going to eat a bad meal and stop me. So here's the thing. This on the left is FitBit's dashboard. And so what it knows is it knows how active I am and it knows when I'm active during the day. And I tell it what I eat, which right now is a little bit of a pain. Hopefully that'll get better somehow in the future. So it knows when I'm consuming calories, on what day, at what time. And it can kind of start to see a metabolic score based on that. Now, that doesn't really get you to the point of like stopping you from doing something bad. It just really like, it's that shadow of what you've done. It says, oh, you did bad things. Don't do those bad things you did before. And that doesn't really change behavior. All that does is like make you feel bad about yourself. So the interesting thing is that if Fitbit were to allow me to connect to Facebook, Foursquare, and Twitter, they could start to figure out, oh, on Friday night, you eat your worst meal. That's when you're least healthiest. And you're usually with Rick and Dan, and you're usually in New York City because they could connect to some GPS data. This is OpenPaths, by the way, which is a really cool open source project. So anyway, if they did that, what they could do is they could say, okay, on Friday nights, Chad usually eats bad when he's with Dan in New York City. So it could start to go, it's Friday night, is he with Dan in New York City? He is? Oh man, we better tell him, let's tell him not to go into that restaurant. Or he checked into that restaurant, let's send him a push message and say, hey, do you know that you ate like 3,000 calories like the last time you were here? It could stop me from doing something stupid. It could actually be really introspective in that moment instead of being reflective. I think that's amazing. I think that's really cool. Going back to Jawbone Up. So, like I said, it doesn't just track how much you sleep, it tracks how well you sleep. So it knows whether you're in light sleep or deep sleep based on how much you move around. And it's like this scientific thing that they've established that everybody goes from light sleep to deep sleep. And what they use it for is you can set an alarm and say, I want to wake up by 6:15 with a 20-minute window, and then the vibration on it will wake you up when you're in light sleep, so you don't come out of like a deep REM sleep and be like all messed up. It actually works really well. I like it. But going back to like, can it warn me when I'm too tired to be sarcastic and funny and not tell people that I blow up bridges? Okay, so there's this thing that's out there now, and Google has it, and they've had it for quite a while. It's called the Prediction API. And the thing is I'll just quote their website. It says, Google's Prediction API can analyze posted comments to determine whether they have a positive or negative tone. So Jawbone could essentially say, hey, well, actually what's really interesting is I went back and looked at my data, and on the night before I posted this, I'd only slept 3 hours and 40 minutes. So Jawbone could go back and they could say, hey man, when you don't sleep so much, like you post things like this. Like, and hey, like last night you didn't sleep so much, so stay off Twitter, dummy. Like, that could be really cool. That could actually, that could be introspective and tell me something about myself that I don't know. And all of these things, they're all asking us to input our mood. So we talk about how big data is our behaviors, it's a recording of us. Well, they're all sitting there going like, how do you feel? Smiley face, frowny face? Like, you don't need it anymore. Like sleep and mood, they go hand in hand. And if you took the Prediction API and you tie it to all of your social and if you tie that to my email, good. Wow. Yeah. That I wouldn't need therapy. I would just have that. So here's the thing, both of these examples, they use wearables. They use these devices. So one of them's in your pocket, one of them's on your wrist. If you followed CES this year, or if you've been watching the news, they're not going away. Like, they're only proliferating on the like really huge scale. And the promise of that, the promise of having smart homes where we put sensors in so we can start to see things like that, and having Google Glass where we have the little translucent Wall-E screen as we drive across the Golden Gate Bridge, or we can hold up our tablet to the Flatiron and we can get the contextual information that we normally have to pull our phone out of our pocket to get. Or this one's pretty interesting. This is a new reading experience. We're in the midst of the reading experience. You can just hold your phone over it and you can start to see online shopping and buy nows. The promise of this is removing technology as a distraction. So if you think about coming out of the subway and you don't know which way is north or south, you stop, you pull your phone out, and you go, which way is north or south? It's a distraction. So with these things, we start to remove the distraction, and I think that's the future of UX. I think that the intersection of technology and people's lives, and the really interesting thing that's going to happen in the next few years is we're going to figure out how to do these things so that technology no longer is parallel with us, it's just part of us. So the last one I wanted to talk about is that if this is going to happen and technology is going to become a part of us, we're going to need help. Because, I was talking about this idea of the shadow and about the idea of introspection with one of the partners at Rosetta, and he was like, well, they already do introspection. I can already look and I can already see things in the data. And I said, well, they're not doing the introspection, you are. And the further this goes, the more help we're all going to need. And so we're going to need things like humane software. And I say that as in software that doesn't demand our attention, software that respects our lives. And the idea of Siri is good. It's just Siri's not very smart. So there's this app that I use. It's on iPhone, Android, everything. It's called AnyDo, NED.do. It's really cool. It's basically a to-do list, but it connects to your calendar. And what it does is in the morning, it looks for a time when you're not busy. At least I think so, because it's never really bothered me when I'm busy. And it says, take a minute to plan your day. And you hit play, and it just starts showing you what's in your to-do list for that day. And it says, do you want to do this today? Do you want to do this later? Or do you want to just dismiss it? And you tell it. And then throughout the day, it gives you little reminders. And it gives you encouragement. So you see, great, go get them, Tiger. It's encouraging. but the cool thing is that it doesn't annoy me. It doesn't annoy me the way that push messages annoy me because it gets out of my way. It lets me live my life. And so if I don't want to deal with it, I don't deal with it, and it just chills. It kind of just hangs out in the background, and it's really humane in that way. And that's another thing that I think about UX is I think about how can we make this more human. So that's a lot. So if I can kind of recap, we can basically say technology has been evolving over 20 years, right? Experiences that were designed for technology are now being designed for people. And that it means that we have to be more considerate of lifestyle, and we have to be considerate of the user. And so with the devices that are going to be aimed at reducing distraction, things are going to become more ubiquitous with life, and user experience is going to be more about being ubiquitous with life. So, elephant in the room. Who are the UX people I'm looking for? Well, I'm looking for psychologists who understand emotion. I'm looking for anthropologists who can discover behavioral cues that I might not have even ever considered. I want librarians who can organize information. I want writers, because I never knew how bad a writer I was until I got a good editor. I want data miners, but I don't want data scientists. I don't need a statistician to be on my UX team. I need somebody who understands how data works and the structure and how it applies to life, so that they can look for the things and so that they can think about the things that the data scientist or statistician can then build. I want designers, because Donald Norman said it best. He just said, pretty things work better. Plain and simple, pretty things work better. It's one of the reasons I hate wireframes. It's a terrible conversation to have. It's wireframes were meant for developers and designers. They weren't meant for clients. And I want prototypers for that exact reason, because wireframes suck. They do, man. They serve a purpose, but stop showing them to clients. Like, I mean, if I had a soapbox, that's what I would stand on. And while I want all of these people, I want people who are a little bit all of this. And that's when we start talking about unicorns. Mythical creatures, magical abilities, right? Purple squirrel, I love that. So like, my friend Jody Leo, she mentioned like UX as unicorns like years ago to me, and the interesting thing is the industry's kind of like talking about it now. Like, I just told Dan recently, there's a thing, Jared Spool, he's a really well-known UX practitioner. He's starting this thing called the Unicorn Institute. It's a 2-year brick and mortar school to teach people to do UX from a generalist perspective. I'm all for it. I mean, I'm for education. I think it's great. It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out and where it ends up. But so the unicorn thing is out there. It's something that people are talking about. And the thing is, unicorns don't exist, but these people do. They really do exist. But they aren't always working on these really cool future technologies or the stuff that maybe I focused on a little bit too much today. Sometimes they're working on like banner ads, or they're working on websites, or they're working on pharma. And maybe they're just doing an email. But the best ones, the really good ones, they'll do any project, big or small, as long as they think UX is the center of the universe. Thank you.
We left some time for